Music is an art form, but just like any other art form, there are people out there that may feel that some music or some things associated with music are unacceptable for certain classes or certain aged individuals to consume. From the very dawn of the television and music boom, the rock boom, in the 1950s, there were many cases of music censorship that took place. And it's something that to this day, every so often, still harbors its ugly head. But the question that we pose today is whether or not this is relevant or ridiculous to the evolution and growth of music. Is it something that was really necessary? Something that was really needed? A keynote part of music history? Or is it just as ridiculous as the idea of censorship sounds to most people, especially those who perhaps watch this channel, listen to heavy metal, or listen to rap, or really just have a brain? So let's examine this. Really, whenever you talk about music censorship, one of the earliest ideas didn't really even have much to do with the music. It had actually more to do with the performance rather than the tunes themselves, and it was Elvis Presley in the latter portion of the 1950s. With the medium of television beginning to really pick up pace, Elvis Presley was now appearing in something that was brand new at the time, and that was the late show format, or the talk show format, as a guest musician. However, during these performances, Elvis Presley, who was a dancer just as much as he was a singer, was shot only by either the waist up, either that or even higher up. The reason for this being that those in power felt that his dancing could potentially rile up the youth and was potentially very damaging for them. It was teaching them a form of rebellion, and this was seen as bad. This was seen as something that needed to be blocked from view, considering on television there was going to be a wide audience that was going to include all ages. It was seen as suggestive and sexual, and at that time, these were no-no ideas. Now, as time would continue to move forward, we would see censorship done in a couple of different ways. At some points, you would see the record labels or those in power of releasing the music directly block some songs or block some albums based off of some of the content that was included within. But then you would also see this based off of territory, based off of country, or really based off of section of country here in the United States. If there is a certain idea that was embraced in other portions of the U.S., it didn't necessarily mean that it worked well, say, in the South, or perhaps in the Northwest. It was something that was very territorial. The Beatles didn't really undergo this difficulty. However, it is said that their lyrics, which were not really blocked, caused a lot more damage. And that, and the added idea of the emerging hip-hop scene, as well as the hair metal, the glam metal, some of the rock, basically the suggestiveness of the lyrics growing in number, caused the PMRC hearings that occurred in the late 1980s, which included names such as Dee Snider and John Denver. In this collective, the idea was to form a warning system, a way in which there could be a council of individuals that would examine records for their lyricism and then place stickers on albums. Originally, the idea probably was to make them completely and totally unconsumable. However, what ended up happening was a warning label being placed on whether it be the cassette or, more notably, the compact disc copy of the album, showcasing that there was explicit content that was coming within. This was supposed to be a warning to parents or to guardians that their children might be listening to something that perhaps they shouldn't be, all depending around their age or their level of intelligence. What actually happened based off of this argument, which created a lot of controversy and responded with a lot of very angry youths or folks in the music industry, was the opposite effect. Throughout the latter portion of the 1980s, and especially throughout the decade of the 1990s, album sales skyrocketed. And it skyrocketed in many of the different places where the PMRC was directly taking aim. Hip-hop music in general was one that experienced a nice boom, especially in the early portion of the decade, that then skyrocketed with releases such as All Eyes on Me by Tupac, or the albums from the Notorious B.I.G. The East Coast-West Coast rap wars proved just enough that there was certainly violent tendencies, and it was being eaten up by the youth of both sides of the country. On the rock side, we got grunge and alternative, and really, the idea of just doing things that were out of the ordinary and strange, kind of directly going against what the PMRC was all about, started to take aim. There were songs that were about the PMRC from some groups, whether it be heavy metal or whether it be otherwise. It was really a topic that was extremely unpopular among the artists and among the industry itself, and really was one that all it achieved was putting on a little sticker that most were going to ignore anyhow. These days, whenever it comes to censorship, it's not one that you see all of that frequently. It's instead something where every so often there will be a block here or there in a country. For example, in South America, Rotting Christ recently is having some trouble getting booked unless they change their name, and it's based off of some cultural differences. However, the one place, the glaring place where there is still a heightened amount of censorship and a heightened amount of regulation among its music is in the country music scene. It's in Nashville. Nashville has an image that they continuously attempt to present, and it's one of the main reasons why some artists will become big stars and become huge members of the Nashville community, or will be distanced from the community, such as Hank Williams III. Now, there are some regulations that are seen from other labels as well. However, these have to be a little bit more stringent. And really, there's a lot of other BS that has to be handled, such as what you're seeing with Kesha and Dr. Luke, that is a little bit more important than the actual content of the music itself. Now, while controversy still may circle some bands, a lot of these bands are going to be within smaller circles. For example, you're not going to hear a preppy girl listen to an album from Prosthetic Cunt and get offended, unless her boyfriend actually, plays it for her. So relevant or ridiculous? Is music censorship something that's been really necessary all of this time, or is it just trying to restrict an art form, something that should flow freely? Now, many of you would probably think that this is absolutely ridiculous, that this is something that just really took the world and tried to break music and tried to make it something that it wasn't, which was a flowing, free, open, artistic landscape. But in reality, music censorship is exceptionally relevant, because with music censorship, we actually saw a little bit of a spyglass into the censorship of the times as they changed. If you take a look at the earliest notions, with Elvis Presley unable to show his dance moves on television to eventually being allowed to do so, it showed that the censorship laws and the censorship ideas started to really soften a bit. And it's something that came with the passing of the guard, the changing of the generations, and recognizing the iconic nature that music was starting to bring to the culture that surrounded it. And then whenever you get to the PMRC, all you have to do is take a look at the massive backfiring that happened with the PMRC, and you understand exactly why this was relevant. It had to be relevant in order for this collective to come together and try to censor the music, to have music fans go out and essentially just give the movement the finger and consume more and consume even more, and basically just say, you might throw a sticker on these albums, but if we want to listen to this music, if we want to hear what these bands, these men, these women, these groups have to say, we're going to buy it anyway. And the funny thing is that these days, take it from me, 5.5 years in a music store, in an establishment that sells the stuff, a lot of times if you try to establish, age restrictions, the parents just come in and buy them for them. So really, is it something that's all of that necessary? But that doesn't mean it's ridiculous. It means that it's relevant because it's still something that every so often gets a reminder in conversation. It's something that every so often becomes part of the culture for a couple of days, where people debate whether or not something should be seen or something should be heard. If you take a look at Anaconda by Nicki Minaj with the accompanying music video, that was a question that was up there for a short period of time, and it's something that's still mainly on the front of television or video or whatever, whenever it comes to exploitation, sexuality, and 1,001 other topics, still comes up to this day. So it does have relevance because of that. Whenever it comes to the recorded media, it has relevance too. Because, let's face it, one of the main things that we talk about on this channel, whenever we discuss pop music, is whether or not it's good for those that are consuming it. If it's actually giving them anything. And sometimes the answer is yes, but most of the time, the answer is no. Do you agree with this idea? Do you agree that this is relevant? If you do, or even if you don't, leave your answer in the comments below. And also leave your suggestions for future episodes of Relevant or Ridiculous. Also, while I have you, we're still looking to get 250 over on the Patreon page, which there's a link in the description box below. If we're able to get there, there'll be a 24 hours of Cover Killer Nation marathon that will take place in April, so we definitely want to hit that goal. Follow the link below if you wish to donate to the cause, and if you do, I sincerely thank you. I am Cover Killer Nation, and I thank you for joining me for this edition of Relevant or Ridiculous, and I'll talk to you later.